It's time to get super and kick evil right in the pooper with this, The Savage Worlds Superpowers Companion by Pinnacle Entertainment Group. Surprisingly enough, this is a supplement for the Savage Worlds system. And while at the time of this review it's probably out of print, you can still buy it in PDF form from various online outlets. As well as all the powers and all the gear that I talk about in this review are available in the Necessary Evil campaign setting for Savage Worlds. So, what's in this guide? Well, it begins with a section with new edges and hindrances for your characters. And these are all very applicable for the super setting, but there's also plenty of good stuff that you can bring into any sort of Savage World setting that you would like. For example, there's a hindrance called Dependent, and your character will have some sort of Aunt May character, or perhaps their son, like Lone Wolf and Cub, and they must protect them because this is a normal character and they get in all sorts of predicaments and you need to swoop in and save them. There's also the Gimmick hindrance, in which your character needs to do something to access their powers, otherwise they're just a normal person. Perhaps you can turn to stone and access the power of Earth itself, but you need your bare feet need to be touching living rock. Or perhaps you have a power ring, but in order to activate it, you need to recite the sacred oath of your people, something like that. So, what you came here for is the superpowers. And this book has about 40 pages worth of powers. And at character creation, they are bought with power points. And however many you start with, and however many you get each time you take the new powers edge, is dependent on the campaign type that you choose. There can be street level, normal, cosmic level, and a few other variations in between. So at street level, of course, you're getting the least, and at cosmic, you're getting the most. But it needs to be said that the cosmic level characters aren't. In the Savage Worlds, the characters are not quite at the power level that you can get with, let's say, mutants and masterminds or something like that. You can more than easily recreate any of the action scenes that you've seen in the Marvel movies, for example. Even Thor. Thor isn't a starting character, his power is beyond that, but you can easily recreate movie Thor using these rules. And you probably won't be able to recreate the truly epic comic book Thor where he can crack a planet in half with one mighty strike from his hammer. The power level is a little bit lower in Savage Worlds, but I consider that to be a good thing and the characters are more manageable. Your mileage may vary. So, what powers are there? There's just about anything that you can think of and anything that you would like. While the power list is not as comprehensive as Mutants and Masterminds, it's not as complex either. So it's something that's easier to work with. And in the 40 pages of powers, there's leaping, there's teleporting, there's telepathy, there's controlling energy, there's controlling matter. So you control fire or ice or magnetism, or perhaps you control the earth itself or water, things like that. So these powers can either be innate or they can be part of a device. So for example, Wolverine's claws and Cyclops' eye beams, these are innate powers. And then Captain America's shield and Iron Man's armor, these are device powers. And if your character has a device, because you can lose it or because you can get caught unawares and you don't, Iron Man doesn't have his armor when he's at a fine restaurant and, someone comes in and ganks him, then those powers cost less at character creation. So a gadgeteer type hero like Batman will be able to get more powers because he can be caught without them. Now, Savage Worlds is a generic system, as they say, so when you take a power like armor or ranged attack, that can mean anything. Your armor might be Batman's suit, it might be Iron Man's suit, it might be Hulk's sort of natural armor when he hulks out, or it might be the Thing's natural armor that he has on all the time. So when you take a power, they have all sorts of various add-ons which are either beneficial or a hindrance, and they'll either add or reduce the cost of this power. So let's say you have a ranged attack. Maybe this is an eye beam, maybe it's shooting bolts of ice. So you can change the rate of fire, the area of effect, whether it's lethal or non-lethal, or you can switch between both, things like that. Now, with any superhero creation, because the character creation is so vast, there are of course going to be balancing issues. So, but these are easily alleviated by the GM just looking over everyone's character sheet and making sure that no one has min-maxed to any sort of egregious degree. Now, because these Savage Worlds characters are about on par with like X-Men or some of the lower Avengers or anything that you've seen in the movies, they're a bit easier to balance, because if someone has taken, let's say, the trait heavy armor like Iron Man, where small arms fire does nothing to him, it needs to be a heavy weapon to pierce his heavy armor. So while a thug can shoot him with an AK-47 all day, he's still vulnerable to, let's say, a psychic attack or maybe an EMP bomb. So as long as the villains are using their heads, they can still take down the heroes. Now, the next section is a small 10-page section of gear. And this is sort of modern day gear, some sci-fi near future gear. And it's useful for everyone, I think, except superheroes. Because, equipment, unless a hero has made it, and this is probably them buying it with PowerPoints, they don't really buy something. A hero doesn't really care that much about gear. Thor has a lot of gold. He's got all this Asgardian gold. But Thor never bought a plasma rifle and Space Marine power armor, even though he could and maybe should. And someone like Wolverine, he's only got 3 things in the gear section on his character sheet. He has a motorcycle, a cigar, and enough body hair to give him +1 to armor. That's it. And so the gear section seems redundant at first, but it's actually, it's less useful for heroes because they need to stick with their gimmick. They're not going to be going around and buying armor and weapons. It's great for the villains. So a villainous group like Hydra, or Lex Luthor's private army, or even Cobra from G.I. Joe, these guys are going to be the ones using the power armor and the plasma rifles, so that these mere humans can take the fight to the superhero and lay the smack on some arrogant heroes and show them what a human can do with a bit of ingenuity. And the next section is 72 pages long, and it is filled with all sorts of villains. Now, they each get they get their name, a picture, every once in a while, and then their stat block and a bit of history. And it's useful. The power level of them ranges anywhere from novice characters to legendary characters, and the theme of them ranges anywhere from 4-color to something a bit more serious, and then some of them are just plain goofy. Like there's a chewing gum based villain, so probably won't ever use that guy, but whatever. And because there's 72 pages of these villains, there's at least 100 of them. And so you can get a lot of mileage out of these characters. There's super villains, and there's also a small section of just sort of random mooks like criminals and some monsters that the heroes might find. Now, the villains, when you change their name, maybe change some of their edges and hindrances, these villains can easily become allies. So when the heroes need a bit of help, they can call on someone, from the Avengers or from the X-Mansion and get some help. Or perhaps it's another hero that they have a friendly rivalry with and they're trying to outdo them with their heroic acts. Either way, all of this huge section of NPCs is useful as allies or as enemies. So, and then there's a small section about bases. So you can create a heroic base like the Stark Tower or the Hall of Justice, or a villainous base, such as Mount Doom, or whatever Dr. Doom has. And you use points to buy different security and different amenities and different henchmen that you might find in this base. So that's useful. So that's the end of the book. But this is Savage Worlds, so what else can you do with this book? Well, for one, you could create a cyberpunk game using the innate powers or the devices as cyberware that your character might have. So if you take the ranged power, that might represent your character's cyberarm splitting open to reveal a shotgun. Or you might use the armor power to represent dermal plating that's under their skin and is hidden. Now, you can probably recreate any of your favorite anime as well. Just take off the superhero masks and put on some ninja headbands or a school uniform as your characters defend their high school from insidious evil coming from another dimension. It's quite easy with this book. You can also add fantasy from the fantasy guide in either the modern day setting or a ancient and mythic setting, and create a truly epic Greek or Norse mythology setting for all sorts of heroic deeds. And so, that is the Savage Worlds Superpowers Compendium. So, if you'll excuse me, I need to go swing around on a web and fight William Dafoe. I'll see you later.